Before you decided you liked being alone, something happened. Not one dramatic event. Not necessarily trauma in the way movies describe it, something quieter, repetitive, subtle. A pattern that shaped your nervous system before you even understood what a nervous system was. Children are not born distant. They are born open, reaching, curious, emotionally exposed. If that openness is consistently met with warmth, it expands. If it is met with unpredictability, criticism, emotional absence, or pressure, it contracts. And contraction, repeated long enough, becomes personality. If you are a loner today, your solitude is not random, it is structured, it has roots. And those roots usually reach back to childhood environments where safety was conditional, emotional expression was filtered, or attention felt unstable. Your brain made calculations long before you were conscious of making them. It asked, is it safe to speak? Is it safe to depend? Is it safe to trust? Is it safe to be seen? And depending on the answers, it built a strategy. For many loners, that strategy was silence. In homes where conflict rose quickly, silence reduced threat. In environments where opinions were dismissed, silence prevented rejection. In families where emotions were inconvenient, silence avoided burdening others. The brain notices what lowers tension and repeats it. So you became quieter. Not because you lacked thoughts, because thoughts had consequences. You learned to observe before speaking, to measure tone before responding, to assess mood before expressing need. That constant micro-calculation built awareness beyond your years. While other children reacted impulsively, you analyzed. You studied facial expressions. You memorized patterns. You could sense when something was off before it was said aloud. Hyper-awareness is a survival adaptation. But survival adaptations do not disappear when danger decreases. They integrate into identity. Now, as an adult, you read rooms instantly. You detect insincerity quickly. You sense emotional shifts before others notice them. People describe you as perceptive, maybe even intimidating. They do not realize this perception was trained under pressure. Another shift often happened early. Emotional self-reliance. Healthy childhood includes co-regulation. A child feels overwhelmed. A stable adult helps them process it. But when emotional support is inconsistent, the child stops expecting it. If crying was minimized, you learned to cry privately. If fear was mocked, you learned to hide fear. If anger was punished, you redirected anger inward. Over time, you stopped reaching outward for comfort. You reached inward instead. That inward turn creates strength. It also creates distance. Because once you teach yourself that you are the only reliable regulator of your emotions, asking for help feels unnatural, vulnerable, even dangerous. You may pride yourself on independence, and you should. But hyper-independence is often born from emotional unpredictability. Your system decided early. Depending on others increases risk, so it minimized dependency. Trust likely followed a similar pattern. If promises were broken inconsistently, your brain did not interpret it as random, it interpreted it as information. Closeness is unstable, affection can shift, approval can disappear. So you stopped attaching easily. You test people silently now. You observe before investing. You withdraw at early signs of inconsistency. You do not need dramatic betrayal to leave. A subtle shift is enough. People may call you cold for that. But what they see as coldness is actually pattern recognition refined over years. There is another layer. Many loners were labeled mature too early. When adults say a child is strong, independent, or low maintenance, it often sounds like praise, but it can carry a hidden message. Do not need too much. Do not complicate things. Handle it yourself. You may have internalized that message deeply. So you became the stable one, the calm one, the one who did not demand attention, the one who adapted. But adaptation under pressure creates internal isolation. You handled confusion alone. You processed fear alone. You questioned reality alone. And that solitude became familiar. Familiar feels safe, even when it is lonely. As you grew older, social environments exposed another difference. Surface conversations likely felt draining. You were used to depth, analysis, emotional complexity. Small talk felt artificial. When others bonded through noise, you bonded through insight. And because insight is less common than noise, your circle naturally stayed small. You did not consciously choose isolation. You chose alignment. Another critical piece, vulnerability. Most loners can remember a moment when vulnerability backfired, a secret shared and repeated, a fear expressed and dismissed, a weakness exposed and used as leverage. The nervous system encodes such moments intensely. After that, vulnerability becomes strategic. You reveal pieces of yourself in layers. You control how much others see. You never expose the entire structure at once. This protects you. But it also ensures that few people ever see you completely. That is the paradox of the loner. You crave depth, but you fear exposure. You desire connection, but you distrust unpredictability. So you exist in controlled proximity to others, close enough to interact, distant enough to retreat instantly. Detachment becomes your emergency exit. When conflict rises, you go quiet. When betrayal occurs, you disappear. When tension builds, you withdraw emotionally before others even notice. It looks calm from the outside. Inside, it is regulation through distance. Solitude, therefore, becomes more than preference. It becomes regulation. Alone, variables decrease. Alone, expectations reduce. Alone, you can predict outcomes, and predictability feels like safety. By adolescence, this pattern is established. You are the observer, the analyst, the emotionally contained one, the independent one, and over time, people begin treating you according to the energy you project, reserved, private, self-sufficient, which reinforces the cycle. Less intrusion, less questioning, less emotional chaos. From a dark psychology perspective, your loneliness is not weakness, it is controlled detachment shaped by early environment. The child who once adapted to emotional unpredictability becomes the adult who controls exposure meticulously. You do not overshare. You do not chase approval. You do not compete for attention. And because modern society rewards visibility, you often feel out of place. But you were not designed for noise. You were designed for analysis. The important realization is this: you were not born distant. You became distant because distance reduced risk. And when something reduces risk repeatedly, the brain keeps it. Now we examine the cost. Because strategies that protect a child do not always serve the adult. The child needed safety. The adult needs connection. But your nervous system does not automatically update itself. It runs old code in new environments. That is why you can sit in a room full of friendly people and still feel separate. Your body does not measure present reality. It measures historical patterns. If connection once equaled unpredictability, your system still approaches it cautiously. This is where the darker layer emerges. You do not just prefer solitude, you control proximity. Control became your silent addiction. As a child, you could not control moods around you. You could not control tone shifts. You could not control emotional availability. So you controlled yourself, your reactions, your expressions, your needs. Now, as an adult, you extend that control outward. You limit how much people know. You limit how much access they have. You limit how dependent you appear. You believe this is strength, and in many ways, it is. But control has a shadow. When you control everything, nothing surprises you. When nothing surprises you, nothing fully touches you. Emotional intensity requires partial surrender, and surrender once felt unsafe. So you stay measured, even in relationships, especially in relationships. You may attract people who sense your depth, your calmness, your mystery. But when they move closer, something shifts internally. You analyze their words more carefully. You test their consistency. You monitor subtle changes in tone. If you detect instability, you prepare exit strategies before conflict even surfaces. This preemptive withdrawal protects you from shock, but it also prevents intimacy from fully forming. True closeness requires risk. You learned risk equals pain. So you unconsciously cap emotional depth at a level you can control. That is why many loners experience relationships that feel intense but incomplete. There is always a layer guarded. Another consequence appears in ambition. Many loners excel independently. You can work alone for hours. You can focus without social validation. You do not require constant encouragement. This makes you powerful in solitude-driven environments. But collaboration can feel draining. Not because you lack skill. Because collaboration requires exposure. It requires negotiation of perspectives, emotional transparency, shared decision-making. Your system prefers autonomy. Autonomy equals control. Control equals safety. Yet safety without vulnerability becomes isolation. There is also the matter of anger. Many loners appear calm, but suppressed needs accumulate quietly. When you constantly self-regulate without expressing frustration, that energy does not disappear, it compresses. Sometimes it surfaces as sudden detachment. You do not argue loudly. You disconnect. You cut access. You erase presence. To others, it seems abrupt. To you, it feels logical. You have already processed the ending internally, long before the other person realizes something shifted. That internal processing habit formed in childhood when expressing dissatisfaction felt unsafe. So you learned to resolve conflict internally rather than externally. Now, this pattern protects you from drama, but it also denies others the chance to repair. Repair builds secure bonds. You were never taught that repair could be safe, so you skip it. Another subtle effect: you struggle with being needed. On the surface, you like independence in others, but when someone depends on you deeply, it can create pressure. As a child, you may have carried emotional responsibilities prematurely. You may have comforted adults or siblings. You may have suppressed your needs to stabilize others. So when someone now relies on you heavily, your system remembers burden, and burden equals threat to freedom. So you retreat. Not because you do not care, because you associate dependency with emotional overload. This creates a paradox. You want connection without weight, but connection always carries some weight. The key difference between healthy and unhealthy connection is not weight, it is balance. Balance was not consistently modeled for you, so you default to avoidance when intensity rises. There is also your relationship with validation. Because approval was unstable early on, you learned not to depend on it. This gives you immunity against manipulation through praise. You do not bend easily. You do not perform for applause. This is psychological strength. But it can also block positive reinforcement. When someone compliments you sincerely, you may deflect, minimize, redirect. Receiving feels uncomfortable because receiving implies openness, and openness feels risky. Your nervous system remains vigilant even in calm environments. That vigilance is exhausting. It is one reason solitude feels restorative. Alone, you do not scan for emotional shifts. Alone, you do not measure tone. Alone, you do not anticipate conflict. Your system finally rests. But long-term isolation reinforces the belief that others are draining, which strengthens the cycle. The darkest realization is this: you are not afraid of people. You are afraid of losing control around people. Control became your substitute for safety, and while control protects, it also confines. The loner identity feels powerful, self-contained, independent, unshakable. But beneath that power is a child who adapted brilliantly to emotional unpredictability. That child deserves recognition, not criticism. Your solitude was not weakness, it was intelligence. However, intelligence must evolve. What protected you at 8 years old does not need to govern you at 28. The adult version of you has more resources, more awareness, more agency. You can choose selective vulnerability. You can test trust gradually instead of eliminating it entirely. You can communicate discomfort before disappearing. These shifts feel unnatural at first because they contradict early programming. But growth always feels unfamiliar. The goal is not to transform into a social extrovert. The goal is integration. Keeping your perception without paranoia, keeping your independence without isolation, keeping your boundaries without emotional walls. You do not need to abandon solitude. Solitude is part of your strength, but it should be choice, not compulsion. The final truth is simple and unsettling. You built a psychological fortress in childhood. It protected you from instability. Now you live inside it. The doors are not locked, but you have forgotten that you built them. You can open them slowly. You can step out carefully, not into chaos, but into balanced connection. If you are a loner, your childhood likely trained you to become one, but adulthood gives you a new power, conscious choice. You are not condemned to isolation. You are equipped with awareness, and awareness used correctly transforms survival into strength. The child adapted. The adult can evolve. That is where loneliness stops being identity and becomes option.